Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Brittany, the maker behind Ginger Patch Designs, and today I'm going to be sharing how I made my keychain AirPods case with you. I don't actually have a written pattern. I just kind of literally watched a TikTok of someone else making one and then figured it out based on my own measurements from my AirPods case. So I'm going to share with you today how I did it so that if this is something that you want to add to your fall market prep lineup, then you'll know how to do it. Just a few notes right before we dive in. Anything that I've used that I have purchased on Amazon, I'm going to link down in the description below so that you know exactly what supplies I have used, including this particular size of keychain clasp. Okay, for our materials, we have several things. We have an optional ruler or just some way to measure our fabric. We have a piece of fusible fleece, which I'll go over measurements in just a minute because your measurements might vary from mine. We have identical cut piece of cotton calico fabric. And then we have a 2-inch wide, just scrap piece of fabric. This is actually probably enough for 2 of what we're gonna use this for. I just like to cut from scraps that I have from cutting larger pieces just to minimize waste. Those scraps are great for like zipper tabs and stuff, but this piece will be this little keychain tab right here. And if you hear noises in the background, that would be my dog. She's very old and she likes to hang out in here with me. So if it was just like a 2 by 2 inch, that is sufficient enough, but I'm just gonna go ahead and make 2 since we have it. I have a 1/2 inch wide keychain clasp. These are in my Amazon storefront. We have our snap pieces that I'm going to gently push off to the side so they don't bounce away, and then the tools to do that. These are Drits. I think I got these at Walmart probably 10 years ago. It's just a very cheap set that I've had. You can also get a snap set on Amazon. And then we have my AirPods keychain case. So this is a silicone case I got on Amazon years ago, and the flap is very worn, as you can tell. So you just need whatever AirPods or earbud case that you have. You just need the case. So the beauty of doing it this way, and why I haven't told you these measurements just yet, is you can do this with either an AirPods case or any earbuds case that you have, as long as you have just the actual case that it comes in. I've also tried this method with my husband's AirPods Pro, and it worked just fine with his as well. And then we definitely can't forget our handy dandy quilt clips. I use these every single day in my sewing room. They are also in my Amazon storefront. So the way that I figured out the correct measurements, I initially watched a very quick TikTok video of a girl making hers. And so I could tell that it was like a longer, narrow strip, roughly this size, but there were no measurements in it. So what I did is I could tell by the video that it needed to be long this way. You needed to be able to fold it over and fit your case in there and have enough headspace to fold this over. And so that's basically what I trial and errored. It took me about 3 tries to get it. And so what you want is enough space on either side of your case. You want to make sure you leave enough room for seam allowance and enough room this way to fold it over. So that's basically what I did. I just kind of started doing this number right here to try and figure it out. So this might take you a couple tries to get the correct measurements for whatever case that you have. But a couple notes that I learned when I was making mine is you don't want to just pay attention to your width this way, the width of the object. You also want to make sure you account for the width this way, because what's going to happen is you don't want to make it so narrow that it's right butted up against the edge of your case here. Because as you can see here, there's a good, what, 1/2 inch on either side here after I've already done this side stitching, because you need to be able to open this to actually be able to fit the case easily in there. Not too big, not too small. So the measurements that worked for me for just a regular AirPods case was 3.5 by 8. And you just have 2 of those pieces like this, and then you cut 1 piece of fusible fleece, a 3.5 by 8 as well. If you don't have fusible fleece, you probably could use just cotton batting. I don't recommend polyester because this is such a small project. And as you'll see later, we're going to be turning this out and it's kind of awkward and precise. And I just don't like the texture of the polyester batting for this particular project. As another side note, when I was doing my husband's AirPods Pro case, his was wider this way, but not as tall. And so I literally was able to use the same size, except instead of inserting it this way, his would go in this way. This one actually does fit that way. It's just a little more snug. And so I guess for an AirPods Pro, you would just make it maybe another 1/4 to 1/2 inch wider on your starting piece, maybe 3 3/4 or 4 inches wide. So to start making our AirPods case, you're going to take one of those calico cotton pieces and you're just going to adhere it to the fusible fleece. If you've never worked with fusible fleece before, it has this textured material here that when you hot press it with an iron, it helps it stick to the fabric. It comes right off. It's not like glue. Also, I absolutely love this wool pressing mat. It's a lot easier for these smaller projects than my big ironing board. It is also in my Amazon storefront. And then grab your 2-inch piece that is going to be for your little keychain tab right here. Now your piece might be smaller than mine. I just cut this piece from a scrap and it'll be enough for 2. We're gonna fold it over right sides out. Right sides out means the exterior piece of the fabric, the pretty part, is on the outside. And we're gonna fold that over and press. Now this is a particularly small keychain tab, so it might be a little cumbersome. And then you're gonna open it back up and carefully fold each of those sides in towards that seam that you just made. You're basically folding it over, pressing, opening it, and then pressing in towards the center to create the keychain tab. Now, if you can't stand using these tiny little pieces and you don't want to use scraps, you could just cut one long 2-inch strip from a larger piece of fabric and you could use these binding makers that are really, really cheap on Amazon, and you could just make one huge long strip at a time. We're just gonna fold that over one more time. It's going to be very, very thin, and you need it to be very thin so that it will fit through our keychain piece like that. And if you don't have this size keychain piece, you could use a larger one, but it could cause it to be a little too bulky. That is just your personal preference though. Now you're gonna go to your machine and you're going to stitch 2 parallel lines. We're gonna stitch that closed right there on one side, and then we're gonna add a nice top stitch on the other side. You're just gonna stitch, I would say it's almost less than 1/8 of an inch on the side because this piece is so thin. A typical seam allowance is 1/4 of an inch, but it's so thin. I just get about that far. I'm not even sure what that measurement is, but it's about that far from the edge because that's what I feel looks the best with such a small piece. And if you're curious what thread I use, my machine is a Brother in Novus 1500D. You do not need an expensive machine to make these kinds of projects. My favorite threads are for top stitching are Sulky 30 weight. I get these on Amazon sometimes, but if I'm buying in bulk, I do order from the website because it is cheaper directly from their website. You just have to order enough to get the free shipping. And then my standard, I believe this is 50 weight. Yeah, 50 weight is 100% cotton. It's Aurifil. I also get this on Amazon. If you have a really good quality machine, a lot of people neglect quality thread. I highly encourage you to do some research on what thread works best for your machine so it will last. So after I top stitched those, I was able to get actually 3 little clasp tabs out of this, and I always keep the extras just in like a little container. I just happen to not have the green ones at the time. So we're gonna go ahead and thread that through, not thread, that's not threading. You're just gonna put it through your keychain clasp here, and it's gonna look like this. And the next step, we're gonna measure 2.5 inches from the top up here. So I'm just gonna take my ruler and right at the 2.5 inch mark, this is where our quilt clips are gonna come in handy. And you wanna put this on the inside. Don't put it like this, or you won't have your keychain on the outside where it needs to be. I know it looks a little backwards, but you wanna have it like this on the inside. So here's the 2.5 inch mark, and that is exactly where I need to put this. This is one of those projects you really need to be exact and precise because it is so small and our object is so small that we really need to try to be careful about where we put things and where we put our holes. And so then we're gonna put the other, before I show you that, do you see how I've got, there's actually quite a bit of excess off of the side? I prefer to have it coming off the fabric, like having a too big of a piece that I can just snip off versus putting it, if I were to put it like right here on the edge and risk for whatever reason not catching those stitches properly. I always do it like this. Maybe I'm a little silly, but it's never failed me. So before we add this to our top, I'm gonna move this for just a second, and we want to create this rounded top here. Now I've seen the kind where it's kind of like at an angle. I've seen square ones. I prefer the rounded edge. You can do whatever you want. You can leave it completely square if you want. I use a mason jar lid that I found in my kitchen. Happened to be the perfect measurement. So I'm gonna turn this here so you can see exactly where I'm putting it. You want to leave yourself, I would say, about 1/2 inch on the top and then center it on the sides. That's what I do. And you can take either a marking pen or a pencil works as well if you don't have a marking pen. And now we're going to line that up because we're going to stitch to create that angle there. So now we're going to add our clips all around. I'm going to leave that clip right there, and I'm going to add another one because I really don't want that to shift. If that shifts, the whole thing is ruined. I have to pick the stitches and or start over. You don't have to add this many clips. I'm just doing it just for our newbie crafty friends out there. So since this is such a small piece, I don't want to leave my opening on the bottom. I've tried that. You can do whatever works for you. I didn't like it. I preferred to leave my opening on the side. So what I'm going to do is start about right here. This is going to be the bottom of our piece here. And I'm going to go all the way around this circle, come all the way down, over, and up. And I'm going to leave about a 1.5 to 2 inch opening here on this side. I'm going to do about a 1/4 inch inseam. You want to make sure, this is the beauty of using fusible fleece, is that this bottom piece is basted to the fleece. So you really only have to worry about shifting on the top piece. I do not use basting spray on this because I would have to use the basting spray on the right side of the fabric. I don't want that to be sticky. So slow and steady is key here. This is overall a faster project, but when it comes to stitching these layers together, please just take your time. I am going to back stitch once here and then just take my time here, making sure we're catching all those layers. And you especially don't want to go too fast on this curve. I've done this a few times where I'm like, I'm just going to try and crank these out. And my curve on the finished piece was just, it was not pretty at all. It was not a pretty curve. Okay, now this is some bulk, and this is where your fingers have to do some work. So I always keep my finger here on this when I take this off. I kind of shift just a little bit to get back to that 1/4 inch inseam. And I'm going to take this one off. And sometimes just through shifting, I don't think you can see in the video, but sometimes your little tabby thing will shift a little bit. You want to make sure it's completely straight when you go down, so it's not crooked on the final piece. And sometimes when you get close, your presser foot will push it because it's so small. And so I just lift my presser foot up and push it back where it's supposed to be, and then put it back down. Now we should be good. Anytime I do like a keychain tab, a pull tab, anything like that, I always back stitch just because it's gonna get so much wear. There's gonna be another layer of stitching on the top stitch when we're finishing it up, but it doesn't hurt to add some reinforced stitching there. You don't want your inseam to be too close to the edge, not just because we need that exact size for our AirPods case or your earbuds case, whatever you're making, but in the next step, when we turn this right side out, you're gonna see that we really need to have a little bit of a allowance over here so that we can sew it back under. Okay, I'm gonna trim that excess off there, and be very careful when you are trimming this up. I'm going to trim about 1/3 of an inch, 1/4 to 1/3 of an inch around. And then, this is very important, very carefully, to keep from cutting myself and cutting into my stitches, I usually take my finger and put it on this side of the scissors, and we're gonna cut these little notches starting at the very edge of the circle, and we're just gonna add these notches. This is going to allow us to, when we turn it right side out, the curve, for lack of a better term, I'm not explaining this very well. It's gonna be smooth. The curve is gonna be smooth, okay? And so we're gonna trim this down here as well. We're gonna do side corner cuts here. If there's any bulk down here, trim just a smidge, whatever bulk you might have down here. And we're gonna add some notches down here at these corners as well to try and get some clean corners when we turn them right side out. Be very careful, because if you do happen to nick your stitches, it's okay. You can just go back to your machine and just stitch back over that real quick so you don't have a hole. The whole thing is not ruined. Now here is my least favorite part. We are going to very carefully, here's your hole, and I back stitched at both of these ends. You're gonna turn this right side out. And I like to go, you can see my finger right here. I like to go all the way up there and grab it and gently pull it out. Even though you back stitch, sometimes because it's so small, the stitches will rip just a little bit. And now it looks like a really ugly mess. I promise it's gonna come together. Now again, this project is so small, you probably don't need a dowel rod or anything to fix the corners. You can probably just stick your finger up there and do it. But if you wanted to take your dowel rod and fix it, oh, look at that curve. Look at that curve. Oh, that just came right off. We're just gonna finger press it down a little bit, okay? And then we've got this mess right here. Now, okay, to be completely honest, for this one in particular, remember I started about right here, but when you turn it back out, it's a little close to the edge of the corner for my liking. And so maybe if you wanted to start just maybe 1 inch up instead of 1/2 inch until you get the hang of it, that's fine. You can still work with this. It just might be a little bit cumbersome. So now we're going to iron this down. I iron the whole thing down first. It's okay if you catch the metal on the keychain. It's just gonna be hot, just don't touch the metal. And then you have to carefully fold these layers back in. If there's extra stringies, I cut them little boogers off because they're annoying. So you fold this back in on itself basically. And it's annoying because it's so small, it can be a little tricky. It can be very difficult on the first few I did to get this even, like this edge to be even. And so sometimes it just takes some finagling. Now, before we go to our sewing machine, it really doesn't matter which side you fold it up. If you want the keychain on this side or if you want the keychain on this side, it really doesn't matter. A little thing of note that I forgot to tell you in the beginning, and it's really not that important. If you use lighter colored fabrics like this, sometimes you can see a little bit of the fusible fleece right here. Now, when we add our top stitch, you're not really gonna notice. For example, on my little, I call this my wildflower floral pattern, you can't really tell at all. Once you add that top stitch, it kind of like tacks it down, and I really can't tell which side that was on now. But just know that if you see that, that's okay. So I'm gonna keep one of these here for right now. Now, when I first started making these, I went ahead and stitched this shut right here before moving on to the step where I fold it up. You can do that until you get the hang of it. I'm gonna show you how I just have one solid line of stitching all the way around. Otherwise, you're gonna have, in one spot, you're gonna have like 2 rows of stitching. So you wanna fold up your piece, leave that there. You wanna fold up your piece just to the top of where your keychain is right here. You want it just to meet right there. And if we did our even stitching, this bottom flap should fit perfectly in between, straighten that back out, in between these 2 sides. It should be pretty even. And we're gonna add our quilt clips. I love these quilt clips. They're super cheap. I use them all the time in my shop. If you don't have any, girl, you need to get you some. See, now that I've added quilt clips all around, I'm going to remove that one that was holding that in place and just add it to the whole outside. So this is what we're working with before we go to our machine. Now, before we get started on the last stitching part of this project, I wanted to share something that I've learned working with such a small project. And I did just change my bobbin thread, but even if I hadn't, I'm gonna bring out that bobbin thread a little more than I typically would. Like, I want these long tails on here, and I do this every single time before I put a new case under here. And I'm gonna show you why in just a second. So I'm gonna start on the right side of the project, and we're gonna stitch all the way around, and this is not a speed race. We're gonna go very slow. So to start, I'm gonna take this first one off and just keep my finger here. There might, depending on your machine, there might be some shifting. So using our fingers to really keep the project in place is important. Now, I'm not going to put my needle presser foot like all the way up here on the edge. I'm actually gonna put it like right here. I'm gonna show you why in just a second. Again, about an 1/8, between an 1/8 and a 1/4 of an inch inseam on this one. And I'm gonna lower that presser foot. I'm gonna back stitch. If it doesn't actually move, that's okay. Now, when I say I'm going to help this along, because it's not quite on the feed dogs all the way, and it's such a bulky project right here on the edge. So I'm not going to pull it, I'm just going to help guide it. And once it's onto the feed dogs back here a little bit more, it will guide easier. I literally go like 1 stitch at a time till I get it where I want it so I don't mess up the stitching. Okay, I think we're there. It took about 3 single stitches. So I'm gonna take this one out and keep my finger right here to keep those layers where I want them. I'm doing this in real time so you can see like just how slow I'm actually going. Now, since we did those snips around our corners right here, you shouldn't have too much bulk when you get to the edge of your corner, but I do back stitch a couple times here just because that's going to get worn quite a bit and we don't want that to come out over time. Now again, slow and steady around this curve to create that nice, pretty top stitch look. And if you need to adjust a little bit, you can do that. Okay, now this is a little tricky. It already did it just a little bit. Your presser foot, even if you're holding it down, you're gonna have to readjust. So I get kind of close and then I pick it up a little bit and I make sure it's flat and I hold that down. You might have to readjust a couple times. Again, I'm gonna help it along back here. Back stitch. And I'm gonna try and get it even from where I started on the other side. You flip it over from where you started on this side. This is the really long tails. If we hadn't done these long tails, something I've noticed is sometimes there's some like thread bunching on the underside where the bobbin thread shows, and it's ugly. It's not very clean, and so it's worth it to just pull those tails out every time. So we're just gonna snip these tails off. So now we are ready to add the snaps. Now we're ready to add our snaps, and please do not stab yourself with this thing like I have many, many times. Now I like to put, you probably can't see in the video, but one of your snaps is bigger than the other. I know one's called a male, one's called a female. I like to put the bigger one on the bottom, but we're gonna do the top flap first. Now you can measure the center or you can just put it on your mat and kind of gauge from there, but we're going to put it about half an inch below our top seam here. So about right there is where I want to put it, and I'm just going to poke my hole, and I kind of go back and forth a few times just to kind of make sure that hole is good and solid. Okay, now from here I do mark the bottom. I'm going to fold that over nice and neat, and I'm just going to mark kind of where that should go right there. Now here, when you're poking your hole, don't poke it all the way through the back. That's why it's kind of hard to like hold it with your finger and not stab yourself at the same time. There we go, and it is finished. There we go, folks. That is it. And so something I do, I don't know if this really matters, but it seems like when you first put those snaps on, they're a little stiff. And so I kind of snap them several times just to get them loosened up. And then after you do it like 3 or 4 times, you can feel that they're kind of getting worn in a little bit. So friends, let me know if you have any questions down in the comments, and I hope this was a super helpful stash buster and a great market prep for you, and I will see you next time.